Where's the meat?
All right, we are going to go ahead and start recording. I'll jump in here and let anybody in as we need to. But we are starting off today on the purchase contract. I'm going to go ahead and share screen. We're going to get right over to that. We're starting off purchase contract, and we are part 2, starting on the financing. Is that where we're at?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Section 2?
Yeah.
Section 2, financing. All right.
Oh, yeah.
Carol, take it away.
All right.
It could be at least a 9-part class.
I told you my husband said I was long-winded, so he said I need to shut up a little bit more. All right, guys. Well, so thanks everybody for being here. Again, I do this with the new people that are on our team, and I appreciate those of you that are experienced showing up, because last week it turned into just a great discussion and everybody had input, and I thought it was really, really valuable. And it never hurts for us to go over this time and again and give ourselves a refresher to remind ourselves exactly what it says in here. So let's start with line 69 under financing. A big thing right here, and this changed some years ago, but the pre-qualification form is attached to. It doesn't say it's going to come later. It's going to say we might have one. It says it's here with it. If you hope to stand a chance of getting your contract accepted, you need to have that pre-qualification letter attached with your contract. Also, here I go off the rails again. When you get a pre-qual with an offer that's on your listing, you really need to inspect that pre-qual and read what it says. I got one recently that said, and I should have had one here with me, but it's basically none of the boxes were checked. The lender said, yeah, I had a conversation. They hadn't seen tax returns. They hadn't seen W-2s. They hadn't seen pay stubs. They hadn't seen anything. So what did you do? You had a conversation with a guy that said, yeah, I make this. Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, appreciate that. See, like, so lender provided, let's see, where's it at? Oh, here on lines 25 through 28, pay stubs, W-2s, personal tax returns, or corporate tax returns. And so the one I got on my listing, those were all checked no. And that essentially to me is back in 2006 when they said, when the lenders were doing the stated income loans. How much do I need to qualify for this house? You need to make 100 grand. Okay, I state I make 100 grand. That's essentially what this form says if the lender hasn't looked at any of these documents from the buyer. All they know is what the buyer said. So when you get a pre-qual on your listing, and we always call the lender on some other buyer coming in on our property, and we confirm, have you seen these? Have you talked to them? Have you looked at the documentation? And we talk to that lender and find out that it really is or is not a valid pre-qual. On the flip side of that, when you are making an offer for your client, you need a lender that's on your team. So your lender should be copied when you submit an offer for one of your clients. And if your lender's doing their job, they're going to reach out before the listing agent even has a chance to call them. That lender should be reaching out saying, hey, I saw that our clients just offered on your listing. Let me tell you about my client. And your lender can make or break the deal for you. So you really need to have a lender that's involved and is on board with you in helping you get that offer accepted. Okay, any questions about that? If
your boxes are not checked on that pre-qual form, really essentially what the lender is saying is, I ran their credit. That's it. Maybe not even that.
Maybe they did. Yeah. Yeah. So that's why on both sides, especially when it's your listing, it's incumbent upon you to investigate, find out if this buyer is really qualified or not before you get your seller tied up in a transaction that you're just hanging out waiting to see if they can really qualify for or not. And then on your buy side, especially in this market, you need your lender to really be on board with you to do everything that they can to help you get the contract accepted. Yeah, Mike.
For the new people, is it pretty much that the lender has this form available and will fill it out and send it to you for your client?
Does the lender have this form available to you to send it out to your client?
So, Mike, that's a great question, because here's the thing. And I've had agents say to me, well, what do you mean you got them, you get your buyers pre-qualified, before, ahead of time, before you write an offer? And my favorite answer to that is, I don't get up off my couch to go show a house if I don't have a pre-qual or a proof of funds from the buyer, because why? Why should you? We had somebody show Stephanie's listing for $800,000, and the guy showed up with this client, and I said to him, do you have proof of funds? Do you have a pre-qual on this client that she can afford $800,000? And he's like, no, I met her, 5 minutes ago when she walked in the door to show up to look at. So, and that, and that's part of our responsibility too. You just don't want to take random people that you don't have any idea who they are, what they can afford, what they can do or not do, into somebody else's home. This is their home, especially if they're living there. You want to know who that person is. You want a lender to have verified, yeah, they actually have a job and they actually make money, and yes, they can actually qualify. There's people out there that just love to go look at houses just for kicks and giggles, and it's their favorite pastime. Don't be distracted by those people, because they just waste our time. So yes, I don't get up off the couch, Mike, unless I have a pre-qual or a proof of funds. Okay.
So the lender is assisting you with this contract by bringing that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we have that before we go show anybody anything. Okay. What are you laughing about over there? So now we get into the, yeah.
Anyway, the question is this.
Go ahead. I'll repeat it.
Some of the lenders will give you just a letter, not the AR form.
Typically with out of state or out of
Your thoughts
out
are,
of
you know,
town.
ask them and they'll be like, whatever. Like it's usually the big box that says on that. Letter, company letterhead.
Yeah.
Well,
Mhm.
that is not an AAR pre-qualification form. So
Yeah.
that line 69 reads, an AAR pre-qual form is attached. So if they've only sent you, it's essentially a pre-approval letter that, hey, they've they're approved for this amount of money. That's great, but we really need this form, because this form has the boxes checked on it to tell us where you are in the process. So if you're just sending over a form that says they've been pre-qualified for this, really that means that they may have talked to them about how much money they made and had that initial conversation with them. So it really not worth the paper that it's written on. Yes. And if they need a copy of it, if they need a copy of the AAR form, I've always got a blank copy of this saved on my computer that I can send over to the other lender if I need to.
If you don't have it themselves, you should probably be concerned.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you do see that a lot with the online lenders, and the out-of-state lenders. So if somebody's moving here from Chicago and they want to use their favorite bank back home,
Big box banks are the same.
yeah, they can do that. So absolutely send them our form and say, hey, thanks for your letter. Please fill this out for me. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, for we can send it, I guess that's cool too.
Yeah.
Doesn't it have our name on it though? To the bottom?
It
Mhm.
does, but who cares?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't care whose name is printed on the footer of it. Doesn't matter.
As long as
The
they,
buyer's signature is required, right? So the buyer knows exactly what's been done.
Right.
They're
that's
the ones that can sign.
That's a great point too, Mike, because a lot of times we get the prequels and the buyer hasn't signed it. So and SkySlope's going to tag you for that every time. So just save yourself the hassle and say, hey, thanks for the prequal. Please get your buyer's signature on it and send it back to me.
Purple box.
Yeah, no purple boxes. That's what the class is called from now on, by the way. No purple boxes. Let's see. Okay, so when does your buyer have to have their loan approval? When do they have to have the loan approval by? Line 71. No later than 3 days prior to the close of escrow. So what does that mean? You can go all the way through your 45-day inspection period, and on day 41, if your buyer doesn't have their loan approval, guess what? They can cancel based on not being able to get the loan. one of my gripes with the contract is that you can go this whole time, and then at the 11th and a half hour they can pop up and say, oh yeah, by the way, we don't qualify. So how do you protect yourself in that manner? You protect yourself by, again, staying in touch with the lender, whether it's your buyer or your seller's buyer, and getting those LSUs all along the way. Now, at Berkshire, we're required to have one signed LSU during the course of the transaction. If a lender is a great lender, they're going to send you an updated LSU every Friday afternoon. And if they don't, call them and ask for one. Okay, because when you look at the loan status report, every item is detailed on that 2-page list. We did this, we did that, we got this, we got that, the appraisal's ordered, appraisal's been in, whatever. And so they should send you an update every Friday afternoon so you know exactly where you stand, so that hopefully there's no hiccups at the 11th hour when they go, oh gee, yeah, sorry, we can't qualify. So if you're tracking them during the course of the transaction by getting those LSUs, you know where you stand, and hopefully you won't have any surprises. And if you have a lender that is reluctant to send you an LSU, that's probably why, because they're running into troubles with their buyers and they can't get what they need, or things aren't shaking out, or as what happened on my Queen Creek listing, the guy decided to just take a sabbatical from work for a while. So they sent in the verification of employment, and it came back and said, yeah, he's on sabbatical. It's like, what does that mean? Who goes on sabbatical when you're in the middle of buying a house? So the agent had to get onto his client and say, go back to work. You're not going to get this house if you don't go back to work. So that one, that one was really tough.
We just had one a couple of days ago where the lender sent the LSU on an old LSU form, an outdated LSU form. And when we asked him for an updated LSU, he got really nasty and said, no, I'm not sending you an LSU. This one is sufficient. We're clear to close. I'm not sending you another form.
That would have been me. Yeah, so, and that one just recorded, by the way. So now I'm going to respond to his email. Yeah, now that it's closed, I'm going to respond to his email and say,
Note to self, wait until it records.
yes, it has recorded. Just did moments ago before we walked down the hall. Now I can send him an email and said, hey, guess what? I just shared with 110 agents in my Berkshire office that you refused to send another LSU because your one from 2015 you deemed sufficient. So there you go. So there's that. There's plenty of lenders out there, by the way. There's lots of them.
It's a very good one in our office.
Yes, absolutely. So going back to this approval thing, so line 72 in bold print that says no later, oh, and this is my favorite, no later than 3 days prior to the close of escrow, buyer shall either what? Sign all the loan documents. That means the loan documents need to be there, or deliver to the seller or the title company. Notice that they have the loan approval with no prior to doc conditions, and that your closing disclosure has been signed and receipted. Or 3, deliver to all of us their inability to obtain loan approval without any prior to doc conditions. I can tell you that every lender that I know of hates, well, almost everyone hates this line. When do our loan documents usually show up if we're lucky? Tell Mike, the morning of closing. Yeah, the morning of
Friday at 5:59 on the day before.
Yeah, exactly. And guys, your title officer needs some time to work with those documents. They need time to get prepared and get ready. She can't just receive them on an email and sign the buyer 2 minutes later. They need some time to work with them.
Okay, let's clear up what 3 days prior to close of escrow means.
Okay, let's do.
Because that's a misconception that people have. They're like, well, how do I figure my days? How do I figure my days from closing? What's your close of escrow date?
There's whole paragraphs in here devoted to calculating these time periods.
Yep.
Go ahead.
So close of escrow, let's just say our close of escrow is Thursday. If your close of escrow is on a Thursday, when does this have to be done by?
Monday. No, the previous Friday.
Previous Friday.
Previous Friday. 3 full days.
Yes.
Yeah, 3 full days.
So if your closing is Thursday, they have to be there by Friday. If your closing is on a Friday, the documents have to be there
Be
by
there
Monday.
Mhm.
So those are good tidbits to know, so that if you are on the selling end of it, and if you're trying to cure somebody to get their act together, knowing what your dates and times and when things have to be there is vitally important for your client.
But they're never there.
They are never there. So what should you do?
Get a better lender. Absolutely.
First of all, get a better lender,
Yeah.
but you're in the middle of the transaction. What happens? What should you do? You should cure them. And what should you say in your cure notice? Pursuant to lines,
70, yeah.
pursuant to lines
73
71
through
through
75.
75,
Yep.
they are in breach of contract.
Right.
That gives them the 3 days to get their act together. So if they're supposed to have this done and they're supposed to be there by Friday, when can you give the cure notice? When can you give the cure notice?
After 5 on Monday?
12:01 a.m. Saturday morning.
Saturday morning.
Yep, needs to be signed by the seller. So you can preemptively have your client sign your cure notice, have it ready to go, 12:01, send it to them. Then
Remember, the seller is counting on the buyer to have a good lender. So, if
yes,
the buyer goes, well, my lender this, my lender that. No, that's part of the consumer protection is your lender
Yep.
needs to be good enough to know the rules
right,
and could lose the house
correct,
in this market.
and
to have the
earnest
current-
money
And to
and
have the current forms in
Yes.
his arsenal. Yeah.
So-
Can I finally disagree with the Friday before to the documents thing?
sure,
Because days are days. So Sunday, they could be at the title company.
oh,
It doesn't mean the title company is going to do anything with them, but title could have them on Sunday because days are days. It's not business days.
days are days, but title company is not open Saturday or Sunday.
So I
Yes.
will say that that's pretty right, actually, because they can deliver to a title company on a Sunday and not have, we can't do anything, we can't record, but we can receive them. So technically, having them Saturday/Sunday is still correct as far as delivery. As far as recording, or as far as open, closing, that kind of thing.
When have you ever seen a lender deliver documents on a Saturday or
Yeah.
Sunday?
Well,
If you
no,
can hear the
lenders,
shit out of
lenders are
them.
now open on Saturday. So Saturday is different from Sunday, and
Yeah.
even in TRID, Saturday is different from Sunday.
Yeah,
But I've seen lenders deliver stuff to us when we're, our escrow officers are gone. But it does happen. I have
I've
seen it.
seen CDs signed on a Saturday.
sure.
But I will say in terms of days, as far as close of escrow contracts delivered or,
Yep.
pardon me, docs delivered to an escrow company, if it doesn't happen on Friday, you can go ahead and
Yeah.
push that button on
Yeah.
Saturday.
Yeah.
Sunday.
Yep.
So I
Yeah.
have a question with that. Does the 3 days mean 72 hours or 3 actual, like?
3 full days.
3 full
Because
days.
it's 12, if you have.
It's not 5 o'clock on Saturday afternoon until 5 o'clock on Monday or Tuesday, whatever. It's actual calendar days. And the purchase contract, and there's a piece in here where we'll get to it as well, where it designates what a day
What a
is.
day
It
is, yeah.
spells it out for us.
Yeah. So if you ever have any doubts, we'll get to that page, but you can go back in here and read that paragraph at the time, which is always helpful. And I always have to do it myself and count them.
The moral
But,
of the
yeah.
story is the answers are always in the purchase contract.
They're always in the purchase contract. Every answer that you need is most likely in that purchase
And I would
contract.
say hire lenders that have a commitment to get it to you 5, 6, 7 days before
Yep.
close of escrow.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And if it doesn't happen, sometimes it doesn't.
And this market is crazy. And so we're all trying to do the fastest closings that we can, 30 days, but put a call into your lender and say, hey, I'm going to write this contract. I'm going to put 30 days on it. Can you get me documents on the 24th, 25th day? How backed up are you? On the same transaction down there in Queen Creek, the lender actually said to me, we don't have enough underwriters on staff to review all the files that we have right now. Sorry, dude, not my problem. Not my problem. Go hire somebody. Figure out how to underwrite it yourself. Not my problem. You shouldn't have accepted the contract and the client if you couldn't do it, So that's, not my problem. Anyways, all right. So now we'll talk about unfulfilled loan contingency. So when can the buyer get his earnest money back reasonably based on the loan? So it's everything that we just talked about in the paragraph above. If they'll be entitled to a return of their earnest money if after diligent and good faith effort, and that's subjective, buyers unable to obtain their loan approval without prior to doc conditions and delivers notice of the inability to obtain the loan approval no later than, there's that 3 days again, prior to the close of escrow date. This is the one single earnest money dispute that I went to mediation over. The one single earnest money dispute. Because the closing was supposed to be on a Tuesday. They decided Sunday morning that they couldn't qualify for the loan, so, sent over their notice of inability to get the loan approval on a Sunday. And I was like, sorry, it's not 3 full days. You're losing your earnest money. So we ended up fighting over it.
Did you get it?
We settled on a portion of it. Yeah. But it went all the way to mediation. It sure did. Yeah. It's the only one I ever had to do, but it did. If the buyer doesn't deliver that notice, then seller can do the cure notice. And I'm not so sure, Todd, pipe in here. Maybe we should be doing cure notices a little bit more often than we do.
I think as a matter of course, you should issue a cure notice. What is a cure notice? It's a notice to the party that you're out of compliance with the contract. That's all it is. It's not saying I'm intending to cancel. It's a notice to tell the person you're out of compliance. And one of our remedies is to cancel if you don't get back in compliance. But you cannot cancel unless they've been cured. So if you are not curing a breaching party, you are doing a very much a disservice to your client. The longer you wait to send a cure notice, the longer you wait before you can actually close and your client can get out of the contract and move on. If that's the end result.
I used to call it a love note.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People take them personally. That's the bad part about it. Agents take them personally. And
Yeah.
It's nothing personal against you. It's just that your client is out of compliance. They need to get back to compliance with the contract.
Remember that. So on line 82, your buyer acknowledges that anything that they've paid out of pocket prior to them not being able to get their loan is just money that they spent seeing if they could get the house. And this would be their appraisal and any inspection costs that they have. So I have the personal thing that I do is I typically will not order the appraisal until I've gotten through the inspection period and know that the house is going to pass the inspection and that the Binzer is going to get negotiated. And here's the reason why. An appraisal can be anywhere from $450, $600, $700, $800. If you order them both on the same day, and then the inspection turns out horrible, you just cost your buyer the cost of that appraisal when it's not going to be anything that they're ever going to use because they're going to cancel and not get the house. So there's that. There are lenders that are like, we got to order it, got to order it, got to order it. And I even had a lender say to me the other day, homes rarely fall out during the Binzer. It's like, really? I would disagree with that. So yeah. But anyway, so yes, we know we want to get closed in 30 days or as soon as we can or whatever, but I like to protect the buyer in that way and not have them spend extra money that they might not need to spend if the house is falling down. Let's talk about that loan status report or update. Yeah, so so I had that delightful lender that said what I gave you is sufficient dated back from 2015 and you're not getting another one. But I touched on that a moment ago. You should be getting those weekly so that you know where that buyer stands and what's going on. That way, if the appraisal hasn't been ordered or if they haven't got the verification of employment or any of those items on that checklist, if it's not proceeding down that list as it ought to be and being checked off every week, something's up. You need to be talking to the lender, talking to the other agent if it's, if you're on the other side, and finding out why it's not progressing along. Okay.
Can we back up a second?
Sure.
Let's back up to section 2D. because we really didn't talk about that. And I like that paragraph.
I'm sorry. Oh, I did skip one. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it says buyer agrees that the inability to obtain loan approval due to the failure to lock interest rates or points by a separate written agreement with the lender, or the failure to have the down payment or other funds due from the buyer necessary to obtain the loan approval without conditions and close the transaction is not an unfulfilled loan contingency. So the buyer's inability to have the funds is not an unfulfilled loan contingency. And if you don't have the funds to close as a buyer, you're going to lose your earnest money. It's right there. It's plain and simple,
Yep,
black and white.
Yep, you are. And yeah, thanks, Todd, for catching that, because I missed that one. And that one's really important because especially with first time home buyers, you see it all the time. They think, oh, great, I've got this great house in escrow. Now I got to go buy all new furniture, a new car to go in the new garage I just bought and everything. And pretty soon they've spent all their down payment. And then it shows up and they're like, yeah, well, sorry, I can't close. I don't have the money. Well, what'd you do with it? Well, I got furniture, so we lecture. And when I say lecture, I mean lecture. We lecture our buyers that from the time they go under contract, you can buy gas and you can buy groceries. That's it. You can't buy anything else.
Credit card necessarily either, 'cause
Don't open a
that
new,
affects your-
yes.
pay your rent.
Yes, it impacts your score. Yeah, you sit still, you buy gas and you buy groceries and that's it. And you don't do another blessed thing. And you don't go down to Mercedes and snap a picture in front of a new Mercedes and send it to your lender and agent just to think that you're really funny because
I have a client that upgraded his Lexus
during escrow.
during escrow, and I'm like, I treat him like a son, I'm scolding him. I'm fine. It's fine, okay.
I actually called the lender during the middle of a purchase. I called him to make sure that it was okay to upgrade my cell phones. Like, I want to make sure that I'm not screwing anything up. It's like, okay, I'm going to upgrade my cell phones and I'm going to change around what my payments are going to be on my cell phone. Are we still okay? He was like, yeah, cell phones are good. I was like, okay, good. So you can do a little more than groceries, but always talk to your lender to make sure. I can supersize the McDonald's. I'm still all right. That's good.
Not if you're a my client. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. And in that case, you just have to check with everybody and tell everybody what you're doing and why. I mean, that's a perfectly good reason to have to, you can't go without transportation, lose your job, and then you're not going to get the house anyway. So there's that. Yeah.
So also,
Yeah.
if money goes into your account that you cannot account for.
Yes. Yes.
Personal drugs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, don't accept gifts from your family or friends or
Overseas.
somebody, or don't go selling something and have a big
Yeah.
cash deposit that you're putting into your account. It's going to have to be verified.
Yeah, it'll have to be verified and the lenders are diligent on that. Absolutely. So if you go sell something, keep the cash under your mattress. Don't put it in your
Until
checking
after.
account until afterwards.
After
Yeah.
closing, do whatever you're gonna do.
Yeah. Then after closing,
Yeah.
Bring it with you.
Hey, wait a second, the mover's on my mattress.
Oh, good.
no. Anyway, yeah, that's a really good one, Miriam, because they will go crazy on that. I tell you what, this was the buyer from hell that bought my listing in Cave Creek. He goes with they knew he was getting gift funds from his dad. They were trying to get him to sign the letter and everything. He and dad go to the bank. Dad withdraws cash and then takes cash over to son's account and deposits it. It's like, great, now we can't use the gift funds because we have no way of tracking it whatsoever. So he had to take it back out. It was a mess. It was just a mess. So key is you need to tell your buyers to listen to you and listen to your lender when we give them instructions. Okay. We do it for a reason, not just to be mean. So there's that. There's that. Okay.
Or just pay cash.
That would, yes, there's that. I don't know. They're probably going to have to verify that as well. So, all right, guys, any questions on any of that? We'll move
2J.
2J.
Forget 2J.
Oh yeah, we're on 2J. Yeah, loan application.
Doesn't apply right now, but
No, so 2J absolutely does not apply unless previously completed, buyer will within 3 days of acceptance provide the lender name, address, and all that stuff. No, Again, going back to the pre-qual, no, you don't go show somebody something until you know that they can find it. So in
For
this,
me, this kind of seems this 2F seems kind of like a moot point. If I have to have the pre-qual
Mm.
submitted with the contract,
yeah,
why am I talking about a loan application
yeah,
after that piece right
Yeah,
there?
how
So
did-
that it just seems kind of
yeah,
a moot point. But I guess you can amend the contract by saying that the pre-qual will be supplied within 48 hours after accepted contract or whatever. So in that case, this still would trump that and say
Yeah.
that within 3 days they're going to have the application and everything in.
yeah,
You
and
also sign on top of the pre-qual that says this buyer has not consulted with any lender, anything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's go. Let's go back and look at that again real quick. We're just going to run back to look at page 2 again and look at that. It's all it says is an AAR pre-qualification form is attached here to an incorporated herein by reference. It doesn't say anything about anything having to be completed on the pre-qual form.
right, it
It
doesn't.
just says the form will be submitted.
So what we're talking about is on line 3 of the pre-qual, it says buyer has not consulted with a lender. Period. So, I mean, technically to be in compliance with the contract, you could attach this. Again, in this market, you're not going to get your offer accepted. So
Well, unless you have a really bad selling agent or listing agent on the other side that doesn't do their job.
that could certainly happen.
There are those out there. Kenneth, no, Kenneth's here. I can't talk
Oh,
about
Kenneth's
it.
Oh my goodness. All right. So 2G then refers to, oh no, this is talking about the buyer has to provide notice of intent that they're going to move forward with it and provide the lender all the requested signed disclosures and everything. So your lender ought to be right on top of this. They ought to have disclosures out instantaneously the minute that you go under contract. And again, guys, this is talking about, when we're talking about this today, we're talking about the market that we're in right now. I can tell you that 10 years ago, so yeah, you could send in a pre-qual that said, yeah, we haven't checked with anybody yet, but here's my, here's
the
my
form.
form. Yeah, but we're talking about today and what you want to do
Those
today to try.
2F and 2G are just because of the federal government's telling lenders what to do.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So 2G
go
is that kind of where you would say that ordering the appraisal would kind of occur after that? Is that what you would take to mean by that your notice of intent to proceed? Is that kind of what you would think, that go ahead and order the appraisal when you do the letter of intent to proceed to your lender? What's your thought?
My thought on that you would have to order the appraisal within the 10 days.
Well, you don't have to, but I think that's kind of what my thought process is if the buyer has signed your letter of intent to proceed with the loan, if that intent to proceed would mean, and it says right there that in your intent to proceed means that you are provide the lender with all requested signed disclosures and documents listed in the LSU line 32 to 35, and buyer agrees to diligently work to obtain the loan and will promptly provide the lender with all additional documentation requested. So if you look at lines 32 through 35 of the pre-qual form.
Yeah, the loan status.
Oh, I'm sorry, the
LSU.
LSU,
Yeah.
my bad. Of the LSU, if you look at lines 32 to 35, you're getting into that point where you're now getting your appraisal ordered. So I think that's, in my mind, that's if you're getting to that point, 10 days in, you should be starting to get your appraisal order. And that magically 10 days is when your bins are.
Is when your binzer is
Is
due.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that. Yep. Absolutely.
Well, that 10 days, that matches up to when the lender is sending out a document to that borrower as well. So
Right.
are you going to proceed with me, or
Mm-hmm.
have you talked to other lenders and going to proceed with them? Because they need to
Correct.
know
Yeah.
that they have to go forward or
Correct.
cut loose.
Yeah. Well, and again, some lenders are Johnny on the spot. They've got their disclosures out instantaneously, and then there's other ones that it's not so important to them. So yeah. So again, you have to really know who you're working with on your lending side. Real estate is a team sport. We all need each other. We need our title companies. We need our lenders. We need our inspectors. It's a team sport. We can't do it without each other. So you have to make sure that you have a good team put together to make your deals go as smoothly as possible. All right, type of financing. That's pretty self-explanatory. Conventional, FHA, VA, USDA. If you guys are not familiar with that, anybody know about USDAs? Those are typically in outlying areas where the government will give you 100% financing. I
My
haven't done
first,
one in a long
my
time.
first loan that I got on my very first house that I bought was a farmer's home loan, and it was a
Mhm.
USDA farmer's home loan,
Yeah.
and it was a government subsidized loan.
Mhm.
So it was, we had very minimal to put down on the house, and we were limited income. This was South Dakota. It wasn't a farm, but we were in a small community. I mean, the town was 7,000 people. So it was a small community, and our place qualified for that. So we had to buy the lot, but we could 100% finance the house. And then it was government subsidized. So it was a USDA, and those USDA loans are still out there, but you're not going to find them in the city here. They're going to
No.
be definite rural
They're
communities.
going to be,
Yes.
yeah.
I think, yeah, there are
Wow.
still places, I think, in Pinal County where you can get that.
Mhm.
But I don't know that there's any left in Maricopa. If there are, they're very, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe Buckeye,
Maybe
certain
Buckeye, yeah.
sections of Buckeye.
I
But
think
that's
I've-
still built up now. I'm not sure that they all
Yeah,
apply
yeah,
out there too.
Well, it used to be farm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So just know, there are outlying communities that you can get one of those. I think I've done one ever. So there's that. Seller carryback, we don't do much of that on residential. If financing is to be other than new financing, then you need an addendum for that. Loan costs are always paid for the buyer unless we're going to designate otherwise. Don't miss this under lines 2J. Seller concessions, if any. I have successfully slipped 3% of the purchase price in there, and I'm pretty darn sure the listing agent did not catch it. So, and I can tell you that this has been slipped in there and agents have missed it. How much is 3% equal to? All of your commission and then some after splits and everything. So you have to look for this box. Make sure that they didn't sneak a number in there on you. This was very common in days past, that sellers would contribute towards the buyer's closing cost, either as a percentage amount or as a specified dollar amount on line 101. So, and it says the concessions can be used for any buyer fee, cost, charge, expenditure to the extent allowed by the lender. Another thing on this is if you are going to ask for and unbelievably get seller concessions, you need to talk to your lender and find out if they can use all those concessions, because you might put an amount in there that's more than the lender can use. And then what are you going to do with it? Sometimes you can use it to buy down the interest rate. Sometimes you can just have it applied directly to the principal so that they have a lower loan amount. But if you're using this figure in here or trying to get seller concessions, check with your lender and make sure that you can use everything that you're getting for them.
So can the seller credit pay for a buyer's BAC fee?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, any buyer fee.
Any buyer
Any
fee.
buyer fee.
It
That's
didn't
right there.
used to be that way until just very recently. There was a change to the purchase contract that changed that verbiage in there that said any buyer fee. Because what would happen was the buyer would ask for 3% concession, and then it would only say towards closing costs,
Yes.
prepaids and impounds.
Prepaids and impounds.
Closing costs, prepaids and impounds most oftentimes aren't going to be 3%. So there would be a chunk of that money that would go back to the seller because it was unused. And the intent of the contract, and this is why they changed it, was because the intent was they were conceding 3%, not just the amount of closing costs. They were conceding that amount of money. So it was unfair to the buyer for that money to go back to the buyer, to go back to the seller. So that's why they've changed the verbiage in there now so that the buyer can use it for anything they want. They can use it for any of their closing costs. That means buying down rates. That means whatever cost they have in closing this transaction.
So if they paid for an appraisal ahead of time outside of closing and the seller's getting the full 3% credit, the buyer could possibly get that money back for the appraisal that they've spent out of pocket.
So you
saying I
Look.
should sneak it in on the dollar amount there for each of my buyer?
You can try. Luke, did you have a question?
What's their standard percentage right now, in the marketplace?
Zero.
Yeah,
Zero.
standard right now
Yeah.
is zero because it's
Zero.
such a strong seller's market. The sellers just aren't
Sellers
paying,
not gonna.
but occasionally they will. And occasionally you'll find some of these sellers, even in today's market, I'm still seeing a few of them coming across once in a while where if it's been on the market for a little while, they're going to be willing to pay. And especially in some of the lower price points, they understand that the buyer may not have the cash to be able to have the down payment and the closing cost and everything. So in some of those cases, you'll find some bleeding heart people that will actually assist in that and pay some of those closing costs. It still does happen. Yeah, I
Really?
think I don't think I've ever seen 6. I've seen
No.
5, but I don't.
Wow.
Yeah.
I always, 3.
Yeah.
And here's something that we used to do in the past as well, Luke. And like I said, things change based on market conditions. But if you had a buyer, for example, and you knew at $300,000 they couldn't quite make their closing costs and their down payment. So in a different market than today, you'd bump the sales price and say, okay, the sales price is $305,000, and Mr. Seller, we want you to pay $5,000 in closing costs to help the buyer out. What's that?
The seller would end up getting the money because of that.
Seller ends up still getting the same amount of money. They get the 300 that they want. Your buyer gets the benefit. And then when you do it that way, you're essentially helping your buyer finance their closing costs is what you're doing. But the buyers have to have minimum skin in the game. You can't go over and above and into their down payment. The buyers have to have their down payment because they have to have skin in the game.
But there's a fun little caveat to that is VA loans.
Yeah.
A vet can finance their closing cost. They can roll it into the cost of their loan. So a VA loan will roll their closing cost into the loan for them if they desire.
I had a buyer pay some of the seller earlier in the year. The market.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
They got us to the close table, but
Yeah.
That was. I think they're almost $50.
And it's a great point.
Yeah.
Like, dude, we're gonna give you. I think we put a dollar amount. It doesn't matter, right? Like I've
Right.
never done that. I've had my license since 2013, right?
Yeah.
But and especially in today's market where and it's when the prices are getting stupid, and to try to make your buyer's offer stand out, something that you could do is to offer to pay some of the seller's closing costs, because he's got all of his realtor fees plus he's got his closing cost. So if the seller has the means to be able to do it, rather than raise the purchase price up, because the purchase price, what's that going to raise? If they raise the purchase price, it's going to raise commissions. It's going to raise other closing cost fees,
You got to get
everything like that. So when you start looking at nets, then that's why when Steph came up with her net sheet, where you could do a net sheet on your offer to give to the seller, genius, because you can show them what your offer does. And if you're paying some closing costs, how that's going to net their seller more money than if they raised the purchase price and did it whatever way that way. So it's a great way to get your offer accepted over somebody else.
The next paragraph, and I always have issues with this one, Todd, and I know we just had it come up with Jenna last week. Changes. Buyer shall immediately notify the seller of any changes to their loan program, their financing terms. If you get a new lender that different than who was described in the pre-qual form or in the LSU, within 10 days after the acceptance, and shall only make those changes without the prior consent of the seller if the changes don't adversely affect the buyer's ability to obtain loan approval without prior to doc conditions, increase the seller's closing costs, or delay the close of escrow. So you get midway through the process and your buyer decides they hate their lender and they want to switch. Can they? Do you have to notify the seller? Only if one of those 3 conditions are met. That if it's gonna change the seller's closing cost, if it's gonna delay or prohibit them from getting a loan approval without prior to doc conditions.
You have to tell them regardless, but you don't have to get their permission unless
Right.
it changes anything.
Correct. You still have to notify them.
You have to
but you don't have
notify,
to get
yeah,
their approval.
you have to notify them, but they can't they can't say, no, I'm not letting you do that. Because if it doesn't
They can
change,
say it, but
and do, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
so what suffices as permission? Just an email from them saying, all right, or?
you should do, if you're doing something that's going to change terms of the contract, you should do it on an addendum. Because if it's going to require both signatures, you should do it on an addendum.
I just kind of think you should do it. So. Contingency, appraisal contingency, sorry. Contingent upon an appraisal of the premises acceptable to the lender for at least the purchase price. If it fails to appraise for the purchase price in any appraisal required by the lender, buyer has 5 days after notice of receiving that appraisal to cancel the contract and get their earnest money back. Okay, that's if you haven't waived the appraisal on your purchase contract, which a lot of people are doing right now. So, so if you get that notice in and it's too low, you need to put the other agent on notice right away that it has come in low, and then start your negotiations if you're going to ask them to come down on the price or what you're going to do on that within those 5 days. Because once the 5 days are passed, then you've lost any opportunity to cancel based on that appraisal coming in
Unless you have
low.
a VA loan.
Unless you have a VA loan.
Because again, VAs are special.
Okay, I've done one VA loan in the last 15 years. Okay, so there's that. I know some of
I
you
do a
though.
lot. I seem
Do
to
you?
run into a bunch of them. Yeah, I like working with vets. They're fun.
So,
Yeah.
so when appraisal, if an appraisal comes in short right now, and the lender is not gonna loan that money, right? So it's gonna be cash out of pocket for the buyer.
Above the.
Above,
Different
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is one way that it can be
Mhm.
satisfied.
Yeah.
You know, it's either one of three things really happens when your appraisal doesn't come in at value. If your appraisal comes in short, either one, the seller will lower their purchase price to match, or two, the buyer's going to come up with money out of their pocket to make up the difference. Well, I guess there's four. Three, they're going to meet in the middle. Maybe the buyer has a little money, seller's willing to come down a little bit, you meet in the middle and make it work. Number four, the buyer has to cancel. And they have that 5 day period once they get the appraisal to tell them what your intent is.
Mhm. Yeah, they can't. If they just don't have any other money and the seller's not willing to come down, then all they can really do is cancel. Yeah.
Well,
The question, just in terms of the dates, you're negotiating a price between the buyer and seller.
Yeah.
And the 5 days pass.
Right.
What happens there?
You better get it canceled.
Okay.
Yeah.
You better have a cancellation ready, because I was just going to bring that point up, Mike. I'm glad you brought that up. Is that if you get to that point where you're going back and forth, or maybe it's just radio silence on the seller end, he's not telling you anything. Well, his inability to come to an agreement or inability to tell you anything tells you everything.
Yeah.
You've got to do one of two things. You've got to either cancel, or you better be coming up with money out of pocket.
I've also written an addendum to make that 5 days longer in
Yes.
that case.
Yeah. Right.
That's also the time when we contact the lender to, what do you, challenge the appraisal or something. If
Yeah,
we
and
can.
that's another
Yeah.
reason to create that addendum, to give it a longer response time, is if you're
Mhm.
trying to do a challenge,
Yeah,
if you're
Yeah.
trying to get an appraisal review, yeah, it could take longer. But then, when you're doing that, you got to make sure that you get that signature on the other side that they're okay with taking longer.
Absolutely. Because your client's earnest money is at risk, and you don't ever want to lose your client's earnest money.
And I would imagine right now you have several other offers on the table that they're like, well, if they say no, I've got 5 others. or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah. Talk for a minute, Todd, about, so this is always, so when you're dealing with a higher price point, let's say, for example, so you're talking about, let's just say $1 million property, and the buyer's going to put down 20%. So now they have an $800,000 loan, and your appraisal comes in at 900,000.
Mhm.
Okay. So the loan is not at risk,
Mhm.
because the lender's still going to loan $800,000 on it.
Incorrect.
you know what? I'm not stating it correctly. I'm not stating it correct.
Right.
What's that?
The appraisal has to support the purchase price, not the loan price.
Right. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to work on this question and get back to you.
Okay. Yeah, but just
Yeah.
to answer that particular question there, though, yes, I mean, it's if it comes in short, even though the amount is over the amount that they were going to borrow, it doesn't matter because the loan was based on the purchase price, not on the loan amount.
Right.
Correct. They would not have the
We still
20%.
have to Talk about whether or not they want to increase their down.
They could increase their down, or what they can also do is they can go back to the lender and say, okay, let's rework this. Can we do a 10% down? And you can do that not necessarily even in that case, but you can do it in any case. I mean, there's 3% down loans out there. So, I mean, if you were going to put 10% down and it comes in short and you don't have the money to come up with the difference, well, you had the money to do 10% down or 15% down. Let's rework the loan, see if we can get it back down. Maybe you can even buy the rate down a little bit to get it even closer. Your payment is definitely going to be higher, but if you really want that property, it may be worth your time to at least try to negotiate that around or try to rework that loan to make it fit. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm thinking of a particular transaction and I'll get my head wrapped around the question and get back to you on that. But we
Okay.
need to talk to Christian about the transaction that he has
Okay.
in escrow
Okay.
regarding his appraisal. Yeah.
The-
What percentage of the time does the appraisal come in exactly at the purchase price?
If
Would you say?
the funny thing is that, and this is so weird, it's appraisers get a copy of the purchase contract.
Yeah.
So they know what the price is supposed to be. So there oftentimes it comes in at price. I would say though, just personal experience in the last 5 years, that number doesn't match as often as it used to. It used to be like clockwork that would come in. That would be what exactly, oh, amazing. It appraised for $348,000. Well, that's funny. But yeah, it would come in for that exact value. But now I'm seeing a lot more of them where they're not afraid to say it came in at 351 instead of 348, or it came in at 342 instead of 348.
Yeah. Todd lost lunch to me last week.
I did. I gotta buy you. You just got lunch today. This one.
No, that was on mine. Nice try, Todd. No.
Yeah, I lost lunch last week on betting on an appraisal with Carolyn on one of her deals. I didn't think there was any way this property was going to come close to appraising for value.
We both thought it was going to be low. We just disagreed on how much low, but
And it came in
and
over.
it came in over. Yeah. So there was that. So I
Sounds like a
extra
good
win.
lunch.
Yeah. Yeah, that should be a really
Yeah.
good lunch. Yeah.
We're not going to Steak 44 for
Oh
lunch.
man. Damn it.
I have a really crappy triplex that appraised. I can't believe it.
You just never
Well,
know.
That's
Well,
not easy.
Because what is an
Yeah.
appraisal? An appraisal is one person's opinion of what that property is worth.
Okay, so personally, I think I win for worst appraisal ever. I have one that came in $275,000 low. Anybody beat that? Yeah. Okay. All right. See. So
What business did you have writing on a property that came in $275,000
can
low?
you imagine? Yeah. So that's the one I'm talking about. Okay, so the people were putting like 40 or 50% down.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's what it was. And so the appraisal came in $275,000 low,
Okay.
but it didn't affect their loan because they were putting so much down anyway. They were still going to get the same loan amount because they were getting such a low loan to value
Right.
loan.
So it does change their LTV though. It changes
Yeah.
that loan to value. So
Right.
it may change their interest rate,
Yeah, right.
but it still wouldn't affect the ability to not be able to close the loan unless the buyer was just like, no.
Yeah. And that's what he was for the first
Yeah.
24 hours. What, Mary?
Why did they even, most of the time when it's that low loan to value, they just waive the appraisal.
If it is not owner occupied, they have to do an appraisal.
Oh, yeah.
So if it's an investor property, they have to do an appraisal on that. We
Yeah.
had to do the same thing with mine. I had,
Okay.
it was I think a 60% loan to value, and they still had to do it because it was an investment, not owner occupied.
Yeah.
Speaking of appraisals though, it's
Yeah.
important that you guys do check mark when you get an offer, that you get multiple offers, because the MLS.
Yeah.
Appraisers
Oh.
look
Good point.
at that.
Absolutely.
They for surely will look at that.
As a
That
listing
will-
agent, make sure that you're checking that box and there are multiple offers received.
Well,
Yeah.
it shows that, demand.
Yeah.
From the
Yeah.
appraiser's point
Yep.
of view.
So that's a great point. So you have to go in after the fact, and there's this spot on the listing under special conditions. I think that's what it's called, special conditions, and you can check the box that says multiple offers received. And yes, absolutely.
And it-
So the
and
appraisers
I
know that.
sent all of the offers,
Mhm.
leave it at the property.
Oh,
Because it's like, you have
If you-
one, but there's 30 others.
Well,
Yeah.
you're an appraiser, so you
I'm
know.
not an appraiser, but I'm like trying to get in.
Well,
Yeah.
you've taken all the classes, you're
studying
just
it.
getting that thing
Yeah,
done.
I'm
But
doing
so
the
you
appraisal,
know,
so.
and if you talk to appraisers, and I've taken several classes on this and what an appraiser wants. Most appraisers don't want the full purchase contract for all the contracts you receive. If you give them page 1, page 3, and page 10 of the contract, they want to see page 1 because they want to see the purchase price. They want to see the terms. They want to see page 3 because they want to see if there's any concessions. And they want to see page 10 because they want to make sure that it was signed off by the buyer.
it was real.
So if you give them those 3 pages of a purchase contract, that's usually sufficient for an appraiser to go, okay, that's legit.
Be sure to catch that box on line 111, who's going to pay for the initial appraisal fee, and it's always going to be the buyer because the seller has no use for the appraisal that the buyer is going to get through whatever particular lender he's using.
But there are times, again, in this market, you're probably not going to get it to happen, but there are times where you can get the seller to pay for the appraisal. If the seller is very aspirational in their pricing, and you as a buyer's agent, you're like, dude, there is no way this sucker's going to appraise. And but the seller is like, absolutely, this is going to appraise. It's like, okay, put your money where your mouth is. You pay for the appraisal. I'll reimburse you at close of escrow, but you're going to pay for it up front. And then if we don't close, if it comes in where we know it's going to come in, you're going to be out the cost of the appraisal. So that does happen. And it's still, even in this market where you're going to find aspirationally priced properties, you still will be able to get a seller to occasionally pay for that appraisal.
It feels like a very obvious box too, that the buyer should be paying for their own appraisal. So if you do have a listing and you're presenting your offers, make sure that it is checked buyer, because otherwise you will pay for the appraisal.
Yes. Yes, and because a lot of times people miss that box and
Yeah.
they don't check it, and then it's left to. for
No
us to
purple
pay for.
boxes. If there's no
purple
boxes checked, Michelle will give you a purple.
There you go.
Purple nurples.
Might cost green.
So in the event that you are able to get the seller to pay for it, then line 112 says, if the seller pays for it, the fee will or will not be applied towards the concessions if there were any. Okay. Any updated appraisal prior to closing, like if they have to go back out and do a re-inspect or anything like that, the buyer is going to pay for that.
Why would they have to do a re-inspect?
What if there were an FHA and there were repairs on it that had to be made in order for the home to comply with FHA? Good question.
Stephanie approved.
The teacher becomes the student. Title and escrow. Who gets to pick? Who gets to pick who the title company is?
Right now, the seller. It's
be a-
supposed to. But
That would be a violation of RESPA.
Who's ever writing
Hey.
this contract?
Hey, Ken, have you done it yet where the seller picked and you said, oh yeah, thanks, by the way, you can pay for the lender's title policy? Have you done it yet?
I had a client say, well, we should have done that.
But you didn't do it yet, did you? So technically under RESPA, if the seller insists on picking the title company, then the seller gets to pay for the buyer's lender's title policy. Because choosing the title company is the buyer's choice under RESPA. So here's the issue though. So you want to get your, oh, and let's be honest. Is it the seller who says, I want to use First American? Is it? No, it's the agent who wants their.
Occasionally you will have a seller who is an investor or something like that who, trust, and they have a relationship with the title person, something like that. Relo contracts, you definitely have, you are using that seller's title company because they've already got, they know how it works.
And if the seller comes back to you and says, no, I want to use mine because I get investor rates, I guarantee you that, that Mike's company or just about any of them will say, yes, give us your investor rates and we'll match it if we get to have the, the contract. The problem is, so you can say to the seller, fine, you use your title company for that part and my buyer is going to use our title company for this part. But what happens then? You don't get the discount from the two title companies for having both policies be at the same place. So now it's a detriment to your buyer because they don't get that discount for having both the owner's title policy and the lender's title policy at the same place. So again, as much as I hate it in this marketplace, if you really, you know, if you really want to get your contract through, you'll use the other agent's favorite title company. Now, I just had one, but my buyer works for First American and we didn't use their preferred title company because I said, nope, my guy trumps because he works at First American, so he gets to go there. So, yeah.
Okay, guess what?
What?
It's 2:04.
No way.
Yeah.
Is it really?
So we're going to stop and we'll pick it up again at title and escrow. Next week is Thanksgiving, so we will not be doing it next week. We're going to take the week off next week. So 2 weeks from now, we'll pick it up part 3. We will be picking it up from title and escrow on page 3 of the purchase
I'm coming
contract.
back.
Nice.
You better be here for that part.
On a Friday?
Yeah. And we moved it to 1 o'clock in the afternoon so we can all go to the tours that we like to go to.